Bipartisan, bipartisan, bipartisan. It's the only way to avoid a shutdown.
America cannot afford for Congress to take government shutdown lightly. It's an actively harmful proposition.
I don't think anybody's stronger. I don't think the country's better if you have a shutdown.
It is time now for our Common Ground segment. Tonight we welcome in Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCaul and Minnesota Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. I want to start there with the possible looming government shutdown. You know, Goldman Sachs did a survey of small business owners, and they said 91% of them surveyed said it's important to avert a government shutdown. 70% said their business would be negatively impacted by one. Do you two see a way to avoid this weekend? First, Congressman McCaul.
Well, I know the Speaker's working on a potential CR bill that has border security on it, as well as the debt commission. Whether we can pass that tomorrow remains to be seen. And then we would have to get this through the Senate by Saturday, or the government does shut down. And I tend to agree with that survey. Yeah, I've seen this movie before. It never ends very well, and a government shutdown hurts everybody, including our military, our border patrol, and our economy. So I hope we don't get to that point, but if I'm looking at Vegas odds, I'd say it's very likely.
Yeah, that's
and Bret, I
shocking.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, go ahead, Congressman Phillips.
I
think people are just frustrated with the fiscal cliffs that we face pretty much every time.
And let me say that, first of all, as a small business owner and one who recognizes why those numbers are glaring, the SBA won't be processing small business loans of the government shutdowns. Hundreds of thousands of women and children who rely on support for food, our military not being paid. I believe Chairman McCaul and I see this the same way. It's not in the best interest of the country. It's a failure, by the way, of both Democratic and Republican House leadership over generations. That have created the circumstance in which we find ourselves, and it's nice to be standing next to somebody who I know sees it the same way, because we got to do better, and there's a shared interest in doing so once we move beyond this.
You spent a lot of time talking about foreign policy on the same committee on foreign affairs, and it is interesting how many different big issues are happening at the same time. I just got back from Saudi Arabia, interviewed the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, last week, and there were a lot of things that came out of that interview, Chairman McCaul, but the biggest thing was the thought that they're close to this normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. How do you see that?
This is the breakthrough we've been looking for since the Abraham Accords were passed, to get Saudi to the point of normalization with Israel. It would be a significant step forward towards peace in the Middle East. Frankly, I didn't know this would happen in my lifetime. But if we can achieve this, particularly at a time when Iran is getting more aggressive, it would counter the malign influence of Iran, but also China, because China wants to be a player in the Middle East. We want the Saudis to come to us and to partner with Israel. So I think this would be a tremendous step forward towards peace in the Middle East.
You know, speaking of that, Congressman Phillips, there is a report out that Saudi Arabia and China are going to hold joint naval training exercises as ties deepen. That says the two countries will hold the special operations training exercise, unspecified date in October, but it's overseas maritime counterterrorism operations. But it's one of many little nuggets that suggest that Saudi and China are getting closer. Is there a concern about that?
Sure. China, the Saudis are playing the field, I think it's fair to say, and that's why we should do everything we can to ensure this gets done. If we don't fill that vacuum, we know our adversaries will, whether it's Iran, whether it's China, whether it's Russia. That's why it is so important. And it's not just important, it's possible. And for the first time since Israel's founding in 1948, an Israeli minister, the Minister of Tourism, visited Riyadh, the first time ever, and a delegate from Saudi Arabia went through Israel to have meetings in the West Bank. That's a good sign that things are moving in the right direction. And by the way, if we can expand the Abraham Accords, which, by the way, I give credit to the Trump administration for initiating, it will begin a process, I think, of reconciliation, not just in the Middle East, but perhaps around the world. Historic and legacy-making kind of stuff, and honored to be working on it with Chairman McCaul and so many others.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of bipartisanship and common ground on that issue up there on Capitol Hill. I do want to play that soundbite from the Crown Prince. I asked him about dealing with President Xi from China. Take a listen.
How do you see him? What's he like?
Well, he's trying to do the best for China, and he have all the right to do that. He's a leader of a country, and he wants his country to succeed and to grow, and he have more than 1 billion people. You don't need to see China failing. If you see China failing, it's around 13-14% of the world GDP, and it's around 15 to 20% of the world population. If that country falls, everyone on the planet falls, even America.
You know, obviously there's a lot of concern in the U.S. about Taiwan. As you know, President Xi, when it comes to that issue, what do you think his vision 2030 is?
We announced our policy in that. We believe in one China, and I believe so is America believing in that.
Yeah, I was asking Chairman McCaul about Taiwan, and I know you and I have talked about that before, and your thoughts about whether China is getting closer to moving in on Taiwan.
You know, I think China and Chairman Xi are going to try to influence the upcoming elections, presidential elections in January in Taiwan. If their party succeeds, then I think they will take a pause. If President Xi's party prevails, however, I think the clock will be accelerated. A lot of people talk about 2027. That's what Xi has talked about. However, I think given the way things are, if they lose that election, and also the fact that the weapons sales, 22 weapons systems I signed off on up to 4 years ago, have yet to go into Taiwan. I think they're a bit vulnerable, and I worry that Chairman Xi will take that opportunity to invade, and it would be a blockade. He'd cut the sea cable and then have a massive cyber attack on the island. Finally, Bret, the real hazard here is that TSMC manufactures 90% of the advanced global manufacturing of semiconductors. If they own or break that, we're in for a world of hurt.
And Bret, let me state the obvious, because I know the chairman and I agree on this. That's why President Xi is looking towards Ukraine and how we support Ukraine. If we continue to stay in that fight, support their efforts, stay there till the bitter end, that sends a very strong message to China and other adversaries about our intentions and our resolve. And that's why I think this is terribly important and very meaningful at this moment.
Well, we appreciate you both coming on Common Ground. There's a lot of it when it comes to foreign affairs, usually up on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much.
Keep the faith.
You can see all the Common Ground segments on my podcast.